Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. Back in the 1980s, the matchmaker Mrs. Thompson introduced me to a young man who was about to start college. I refused immediately because in my previous life, this same man had taken the money I worked so hard to save and used it to go on dates with other girls at his university. When he graduated, he looked at me with contempt and said, "I'm a college graduate and you're just a factory worker. Do you really think we're a match?" He was right. We weren't. So, in this life, I firmly rejected Mrs. Thompson's proposal. But I never expected that he would come looking for me himself. When Ryan showed up, I was squatting in the kitchen tending the fire. Our big yellow dog suddenly started barking like crazy. I thought it was the neighborhood kids fooling around, so I quickly dropped the firewood and ran outside, afraid the dog might scare someone. But the moment I stepped out the door, I froze. A younger version of Ryan was standing right in front of the gate, breathing heavily, his eyes locked tightly on me. "Why did you refuse to get engaged to me?" he demanded. Just then, my mother came out of the main house holding a farming tool in her hand. I was startled, but she was overjoyed. After all, within 10 miles of our village, it was hard to find a young man as handsome as him, let alone one who was willing to come all the way to our house to show his sincerity. My mother warmly invited him inside, quickly pouring him a cup of hot tea, so precious that she even added a spoonful of white sugar. I bit my lip and stayed silent. Ryan must have run all the way here because even after sitting down for quite a while, he still hadn't caught his breath. It was winter and he was wearing a thick green army-style coat. The wind had tousled his bangs and sweat still clung to his forehead. Even so, his face was so striking that it was impossible not to feel something. In my previous life, I had been completely enchanted by that very face. I willingly handed over all the money I earned from working just to help him. During every winter or summer break, I brought him to my rented room, taking care of everything for him. Cooking, cleaning, doing laundry, just so he could study in peace. Fortunately, he was ambitious and became the first person in our area to be admitted to graduate school. I was so happy that I continued to support him. Ryan got into a graduate program in a distant southern city. On the day he left, I stuffed all 2,000 yuan I had saved into his hands and told him not to be too frugal. Otherwise, his classmates might look down on him. Ryan was moved, holding my hands tightly. "I'll study hard," he promised. "When I graduate, I'll come back and marry you." Our neighbor Jack overheard the conversation and warned me, "You'd better be careful. This might be like pouring water into a river. You'll never get it back." But I didn't believe him. I insisted that Ryan was an educated man, and that someone like him would never break his word. But time proved that Jack was right. The promises Ryan made to me were long forgotten before they were ever fulfilled. When Ryan graduated from graduate school, I took the overnight train to attend his ceremony. What I saw shattered me. He was holding another girl in his arms. I couldn't believe it. I rushed over, desperate, and confronted him. But all he said was, "I'm a graduate student now and you're just a factory worker. Do you really think we're a match? If you have any sense, you'll leave quietly. Don't make a scene. You're only embarrassing yourself." With that, Ryan took the girl's hand and walked away. I heard they were going to a graduation party together. That night, I waited outside the school gate until midnight, but he never came. I was hungry and exhausted, so I took 2 chicken feet from my bag to eat. I had brought them all the way from home. Ryan loved them, so I had cooked them specially and even reheated them at a breakfast stall on my way to campus. Now they were cold. Absent-mindedly, I bit into one, and before I knew it, tears were streaming down my face as students passed by, laughing and talking, not even noticing me standing there in the dark. Everyone looked at me with puzzled eyes. I couldn't take it anymore. I covered my face and burst into tears. I had waited for Ryan for so many years, only to receive such cruel words in return. I couldn't accept it. I went to his house crying and screaming. But what did it change? He brazenly brought that other girl home, turning me into a laughingstock for everyone. People said Ryan had toyed with me for 8 years, and in the end, I was left as nothing more than a pitiful abandoned woman. In those days, words like that were enough to destroy a woman's life. My mother went to Ryan's house to demand justice, but his family refused to open the door. In her fury and despair, she slammed her head against their gate and died. The whole town was shaken. Under the pressure of public opinion, Ryan reluctantly agreed to marry me. On our wedding day, when the car passed by my mother's grave, I told the driver to stop. Then I stepped on the gas myself, driving straight off the cliff, dragging Ryan with me. When I opened my eyes again, I was back to being 18. After meeting my mother this time, Ryan acted polite and respectful. As soon as she finished pouring tea, he quickly stood up to take the cup from her hands and said with a bright smile, "Thank you, ma'am." My mother beamed, delighted that someone had called her that for the first time. "Oh, don't be so polite. Sit," she said warmly, pulling him down to sit beside her. Then she began asking about his family and his studies. When she learned that he was the top student in the county, her face lit up like a flower. She nodded repeatedly and said, "Good, 3 times in a row." "I'll definitely study hard and get into a good university," Ryan promised earnestly, "so I won't disappoint anyone." Then he sneaked a glance at me. My mother caught the look and paused for a moment before smiling knowingly. "Lily, why don't you sit here and talk with him?" she said. "I'll go to the market to buy a few things." She even winked at me playfully before grabbing her basket and heading out. Now there were only the two of us in the room. I reached out my hand and said, "Give it to me." Ryan blinked, confused. "What?" I gave a cold smile, stood up, and snatched the teacup from his hand, finishing it in one gulp. The bit of sugar my mother had added was a luxury. Since my rebirth, she hadn't even let me have a taste of it. There was no way I was letting Ryan enjoy it instead. "Now tell me, why are you here?" I asked. He seemed surprised by my attitude. After a pause, he said, "Mrs. Thompson told me you refused our engagement. I just want to know why." Mrs. Thompson was the same matchmaker who had introduced us before. In my previous life, when Ryan had stubbornly insisted on breaking off our engagement, Mrs. Thompson came to my house with a cane, apologizing over and over, blaming herself for misjudging him and ruining my life. But it wasn't her fault. The one who destroyed me was the man who took advantage of my love again and again. What other reason could there be? I said flatly, "We're just not a good match." I looked up at him, my eyes filled with coldness. "I already turned you down, yet you still came all the way here." "What?" Hoping to win me over by shameless persistence. A flicker of embarrassment crossed his face. He quickly shook his head. "No, that's not it. I just saw your picture and liked you. I thought maybe I should give it a try." I suddenly remembered that in my previous life, it was because of my face that Ryan had agreed to get engaged to me. Even though I wasn't an excellent student, my looks were something even my own mother used to marvel at. "How strange," she used to say. "How did I ever give birth to such a beautiful daughter?" After we got engaged, Ryan's mother had once told others, "My son Ryan is so picky. People have introduced him to countless girls, and he never liked any of them. But the moment he saw her photo, his eyes just lit up. First, Ryan liked my face. Then he liked the way I cared for him, how I supported and tended to him without complaint. But in the end, what he truly loved was power and money. I became nothing more than an outdated ornament left behind. I had no value left to him, something he could throw away whenever he pleased. But things were different now. Plenty of men liked me. I looked straight at Ryan and gave a faint mocking smile. "You're just a poor college student. What makes you think you can compete with anyone else?" My gaze was full of ridicule. "What's your advantage, Ryan?" "Your shamelessness." He straightened up, confidence flashing in his eyes. "With my grades, I can get into a good university. Maybe even graduate school later. Isn't that enough to qualify?" I gave a cold laugh. "I'm afraid that when the time comes, you'll just say I'm not good enough for you again." Ryan's expression changed slightly. "Are you worried you're not worthy of me? Afraid that after I graduate, I'll leave you?" His tone grew louder as if he had found my weak spot. "If that's what you're worried about, we can get married first." What he called getting married was just holding a small wedding banquet. In the countryside during this era, it was common. If you weren't old enough to register a marriage, all you had to do was host a feast, invite relatives and neighbors, and that was enough to be considered husband and wife. But in my previous life, wasn't that exactly what we had done? And when he wanted to leave, he left just like that. This time, if I still got tangled up with him, I'd truly deserve whatever came to me. I took a step back, looking him up and down with open disdain. Who gave you the confidence to be this shameless? Let me be clear. I don't like you. Not one bit. If you have even a shred of self-respect, you should know when to leave. Don't stand here shouting nonsense. You might not feel embarrassed, but I'm embarrassed for you. In my past life, those exact words had come from his mouth. Back then, I couldn't even argue back. But now, saying them to him felt incredibly satisfying. Ryan's face changed instantly. He'd always been proud, and hearing that was a direct slap to his ego. But he forced himself to smile, trying to stay calm. Lai, don't be stubborn. If I'm not mistaken, I'm probably the best choice you have, aren't I? I tilted my head and glanced toward the yard next door, smiling faintly. Not necessarily. Ryan noticed where I was looking and frowned, then chuckled. Don't tell me you're talking about those guys who barely finished middle school. Those idiots. They're not even in the same league. His tone was dripping with arrogance. Academic achievement had always been his greatest pride. Anyone who wasn't as educated as him was automatically beneath him. I sneered. He might be a fool, but you're the one without a brain. That line hit hard. Ryan's face twisted in anger, and he suddenly stood up, his voice sharp. Fine, keep that mouth of yours. One day you'll regret it. Whether I would regret it or not I didn't know, but I was certain he'd regret coming here today. When he left, his face was pale with anger, then flushed red with humiliation. The sight was priceless. In my previous life, after Ryan broke off our engagement, there really was a fool who wanted to marry me. By then, my mother had already passed away, and my father had fallen ill. Everyone in the village avoided our family like we carried bad luck. The only person who stepped up to help was Jack. His full name was Jack Noble. He lived right next door, separated from us by a single wall. Jack wasn't good at school. He dropped out after middle school and went south to work. Later, he started a small business and from what I heard, made decent money. Every year, plenty of people tried to introduce him to potential wives, but for some reason he always refused. The day before Ryan and I were supposed to get married, Jack climbed up onto the wall between our houses and said, "Why don't you think about me instead? I'm not as educated as him, but I've got more money and I'm better looking too." He said it jokingly, his tone full of confidence, but the tension in his face gave him away. I stared at him for a long moment before smiling softly. "Not in this life, Jack. But if there's another one, I'll definitely marry you." He grinned. "You think too highly of yourself. I might not even want to marry you in the next life." Neither of us knew back then just how true those words would turn out to be. So reincarnation really was real. When I woke up and saw Jack again, he was standing in front of his house, holding a hoe and carefully turning the soil. I rested my chin on my hand, watching him without blinking. He grew so uncomfortable under my stare that he didn't know what to do with his hands. Finally, he frowned and said, "If you've got something to say, just say it. Why are you staring at me like that?" I hadn't expected the younger version of him to be so direct. The thought of teasing him a little crossed my mind, so I pointed toward the pile of firewood stacked outside my gate. "My dad went to the county for work," I said lightly. "You know I can't chop firewood." I thought he'd scoff and tell me to dream on, but to my surprise he nodded right away. That day, he carried all the firewood into his yard and said he'd bring it back after chopping it for me. In that moment I couldn't resist checking what he was doing. So I grabbed a chair, stood on it, and poked my head over the wall between our houses. One glance and I froze. It was freezing cold outside. Yet Jack was shirtless, wearing only thick cotton pants as he swung his axe with fierce determination. He looked like he was waging war on the wood pile. With one heavy strike, the axe split a log as thick as my waist clean in two. I twitched the corner of my mouth and called out, "Jack!" He turned his head sharply at the sound of my voice, eyes wide in shock, his hand trembling as he pointed at me. "What are you doing up there?" I tilted my head and smiled down at him brightly. "Looking at you." The axe in his hand slipped and clattered to the ground. Flustered, he scrambled to grab his shirt and threw it on, his face turning red with a mix of embarrassment and anger. "Don't you have any shame? What kind of girl climbs walls to spy on people like that?" The tips of his ears were burning red, and for a second I was taken aback. He was so pure and straightforward that I actually felt a little shy. I blinked, turned my head away and murmured, "Fine, I'll get down then." "Wait," he said quickly, stepping closer and looking up at me. His gaze lingered on my face before he asked, "So, how did your matchmaking go?" I grinned. I turned him down. Jack's eyes widened in disbelief. "Really? I heard he's going to be a college student. Isn't that good enough?" "It's good," I said with a shrug. "But I just don't like him." He was silent for a moment, then asked, "So what kind of guy do you like?" From my height, my eyes accidentally drifted to the open collar of his shirt, and the image of him chopping wood shirtless flashed through my mind. Smirking, I said slowly, "Someone with a good body and abs." I thought he'd get angry, but he didn't. He just froze for a second, then looked straight at me. "Really?" My face grew warm for no reason. "Yeah, really." Immediately, a wide grin spread across his face, his joy written all over it. I hesitated for a moment, then added mischievously, "Oh, and it'd be best if he could chop firewood, too." Jack's grin grew even goofier. I leaned against the wall, feeling rather pleased with myself until my mother's furious voice shouted from behind me, "Lai Grant, get down here right now." My mother was furious. She had just come home and run into Ryan, who told her I'd turned him away. She was livid and demanded that I make up for it by finding her another college-educated son-in-law. There might not be a college-educated son-in-law, I thought, but there could be a college-educated daughter. In my past life, I'd studied high school level lessons on my own just so I could have something to talk about with Ryan. This time I had already decided I would take the college entrance exam myself because I finally understood one thing. Rather than helping someone else chase their dreams, it was better to build my own future. No one could shield me from the wind and rain forever, unless I held the umbrella myself. When my mother heard me say I wanted to go to college, she froze on the spot, too stunned to speak. Then her expression hardened with caution. "No," she said firmly. "The money in this house has to be saved for your little brother. We can't afford to send both of you to school." I had already expected that response. My mother carried the same mindset as most women from rural families back then, valuing sons over daughters and believing that educating a girl was a waste of money. Remembering all the things she had done to me in my previous life, I decided not to argue with her this time. "Mom, my little brother's still a kid," I pleaded softly. "Can't you lend me the money first?" "No," she snapped. "Don't even dream about it." No matter what I said, she refused to agree. We were in the middle of a heated argument when suddenly a head popped out from over the wall. "I'll pay for her," a familiar voice called out. Both my mother and I turned our heads at the same time. Jack was standing there, scratching the back of his head, looking a little embarrassed. "Auntie," he said, "I'll cover Lily's school expenses." 2 minutes later, Jack walked into our house freshly dressed. As soon as he stepped through the door, he pulled a cloth pouch from inside his jacket and shoved it into my mother's hands without saying a word. Then, looking awkward again, he scratched his head and said, "Auntie, this is the money I've saved up over the years. Please use it to let Lily go to school." My mother held the pouch, her face flushing with embarrassment. "Oh, Jack," she said quickly, "Lily's just being impulsive. Don't take her words seriously. You should keep that money for your own marriage. Take it back. Go on." "It's fine, ma'am," Jack said earnestly. "I saved this money for her anyway." "What did you just say?" My mother froze, staring at him with wide, stunned eyes. "Why would you give her your money?" Jack didn't answer. He just smiled shyly and glanced at me out of the corner of his eye. My mother inhaled sharply, then hurriedly shoved the pouch back into his hands and pushed him toward the door. "We can take care of our own daughter. We don't need your money. Go now quickly." Before Jack could even react, she had pushed him all the way to the door and slammed it shut with a loud bang. I frowned. "Mom, why did you do that? Jack was just trying to help. He's a good person." My mother's eyes flashed angrily as she pointed a finger straight at my nose. "Don't you dare speak up for him." I immediately shut my mouth. The whole thing had genuinely frightened her. After that, she practically kept me under house arrest, watching me every minute as if she was afraid I might sneak out to see Jack again. I didn't want to make her so angry that she'd fall sick. So I quietly stayed in my room and studied. I didn't even dare to say Jack's name out loud. That evening, when my father came home from work, the two of them sat together discussing the situation for a long time. Finally, after much arguing, they gritted their teeth and decided to let me go to school. If we have to, my father said heavily, we'll sell the land. But then came the condition. You are absolutely not allowed to have any contact with that boy, my mother warned. I understood why they were so strongly against him. Jack was 2 years older than me. His parents had died when he was 12, and ever since then, he had supported himself by doing small business in town. People called him a street vendor, a petty trader, an orphan with no family, and an unstable job. Even though he was already 20, no one in the village wanted to arrange a marriage for him. No parents would ever agree to marry their daughter to someone like that. And my mother was no exception. But I couldn't tell her the truth that in the future, Jack would become a very successful man. Nor could I tell her that in my past life, he was the one who had handled her funeral after she passed away. If I dared to say any of that, she'd probably beat me to death on the spot. Even though I had no intention of taking Jack's money, cutting ties with him completely was something I simply couldn't do. Seeing me stay silent, my mother lost her temper again and pinched my arm hard. Did you hear me? Answer me, or are you trying to make me so angry I die? Seeing her eyes well up, I quickly nodded. I heard you, Mom. I heard you. But this isn't something that can be rushed. After all, in my previous life, Jack hadn't married anyone by the time I died. There was no need to hurry things now. Although I promised my parents I wouldn't see Jack anymore, they still didn't trust me. That very same day, they found a buyer for our land and took me to the county to enroll in school. Once I passed the entrance test, they even paid extra for me to stay in the dormitory. By the time I realized what was happening, I was already sitting in a classroom again. Returning to school filled me with excitement and joy. Though of course I would have been even happier if a certain scumbag hadn't been there. Because the moment I walked into class, I saw Ryan sitting in the front row. The instant he saw me, his face went pale, his eyes widening as if he'd just seen a ghost. 2 class periods passed. A deskmate leaned close and whispered in my ear, Lily, I think the top student in our class keeps staring at you. Ryan, who was sitting in front of me, had looked back at me more than 10 times during that single lesson. Eventually, even the teacher couldn't stand it and called his name out in front of the whole class. Only then did he pull himself together a little. I didn't bother to care. The grudge from my past life needed settling, but this life mattered more. Right now, I had to study hard and get into a good university. At recess, Ryan tried to pull me into a shadowed corner and ground his teeth. What are you even doing here? He asked. I remembered the first time I came to school in my former life. He'd looked at me with disgust and surprise and said the exact same thing. Back then, I was too afraid of making him lose face to answer. I'd curled up and tried to hide in the corner. This time was different. I pushed him away with a cold smile, stepped out into the crowded hallway, and snapped loudly. Are you blind? Can't you see? I'm here to study. The sound drew the attention of everyone nearby. Ryan's face flamed. He hissed at me in a low voice. Don't make me lose face here. What are you doing at school? School isn't a place for you girls. Go home right now, he ordered, as if he had the right to command me. I couldn't help but laugh. Who do you think you are? Some big shot. What pond do you come from to be so full of yourself? Whether I go to school is none of your business. Since when did this school become your house that you can decide who's in and who's out? The hallway fell suddenly silent when my words ended. Every student turned to look at us. Ryan panicked and grabbed my hand, whispering sharply, I'll give you one last chance. Leave this school right now and maybe I'll consider marrying you. I shoved him away and hissed, Marry you? Do you understand plain speech? You've been rejected twice and you still cling to me? You're just itching to leech off a woman, aren't you? At that moment, someone shouted from behind, Principal, over here. The students scattered and ran back to their classes in a panic. Ryan tried to bolt, but only made it 2 steps before crashing into the principal. The old man with white hair was knocked to the ground. His glasses and papers flew everywhere. Ryan had stepped right on the principal's glasses. Teachers and students erupted in chaos. The principal slammed his thigh and shouted in fury. Half an hour later, in front of every teacher and student, I stood in the schoolyard and calmly recounted exactly what had happened. Ryan stood beside me with his head bowed, silent like a quail. From his posture, I could tell he was seething, so humiliated he couldn't find a hole to crawl into. For perhaps the first time in his life, he was that ashamed in front of so many people. His face went from flushed red to greenish and finally ashen white. Though the school only formally reprimanded him, the public humiliation cut deeper than anything for Ryan. The cold, aloof image of the top student he had cultivated completely collapsed. Classmates pointed fingers and gossiped endlessly. After that incident, Ryan was a changed person. He kept his head down, avoided meeting anyone's eyes, and flinched at the slightest whisper, convinced people were talking about him. Once in a fit of paranoia, he even flipped over a classmate's desk. That classmate's parent came to the school furious and slapped Ryan across the face. Ryan lost control and lunged at the parent, and a fight broke out right there. The whole matter became a very serious issue. The school demanded that Ryan bring his parents in for a meeting. His mother, who had always been proud of her son, was humiliated beyond measure. The moment she arrived, she slapped him hard twice in front of everyone. Those two sharp blows shattered every last bit of pride he had left. After that, Ryan became quieter by the day, his grades slipping uncontrollably. Behind his back, classmates called him crazy, and no one dared to hang out with him anymore. On the last day before winter break after class, my deskmate leaned close and whispered, "Lily, have you noticed how Ryan's been looking at you lately? It's kind of scary. You should be careful on your way home." That morning's classes were the last before vacation, and most students living in dorms were packing to go home. Her warning wasn't unreasonable. I patted the brick hidden in my school bag and smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry, I'm ready." Sure enough, after school, Ryan followed me down a narrow alley. When I realized there wasn't another soul around, he dropped his bag to the ground, letting out a low, twisted laugh. His dark, wild eyes glared at me. "It's all your fault," he snarled. "You ruined my life, you filthy bitch." I slipped a hand into my bag and gave a cold smile. "You brought it on yourself, Ryan. You deserve it. You worthless trash." He spat. "If you don't know your place, I'll make you pay for it." Before he could finish, a sudden kick slammed into his back, sending him flying forward. His face smashed against the cold stone ground with a sickening crack. Jack stood behind him, his face like ice. He stepped forward, grabbed a fistful of Ryan's hair, and yanked his head back violently. "Go on," he growled. "Say that again." Ryan lifted his head, mouth hanging open, and one of his front teeth fell out, clattering onto the pavement. I couldn't help but let out a quiet sigh. "That's rough," I muttered, pulling my hand out of my bag. Guess the brick wouldn't be needed after all. Ryan had always been proud of his looks. The moment he realized he'd lost a tooth, he went berserk. He rolled over, leapt to his feet, and swung a punch at Jack. But Jack caught his wrist easily and without hesitation, kicked him square in the stomach. Ryan doubled over in pain, clutching his abdomen. When he finally looked up, his eyes burned with rage. But then he saw Jack's face clearly. He froze, pupils shrinking, his whole body trembling. Jack frowned in confusion. "You know me." Ryan blinked rapidly, panic flashing in his eyes. No, I don't," he stammered, then scrambled to grab his bag, spinning around to run. Jack grabbed him by the collar before he could escape. Before Jack could even say a word, Ryan's face went chalk white, and he began to shake uncontrollably. "I won't do it again. I swear I'll never go near Lily again," he screamed, and then to my utter disbelief, he wet himself right there on the spot. Jack grimaced and released him immediately. Then he took my hand and led me out of the alley. "How did you even know I was here?" I asked. He slung my school bag over his shoulder, grinning proudly. "There are only 2 high schools in this county. This one's the closest to our village." I couldn't help laughing. "Smart thinking," I teased. Jack's face turned red. "Are you treating me like a kid again?" I smiled but said nothing. Even though I was 18 now, my mind was 15 years older than his. To me, he really did feel like a boy, sweet, earnest, a little clumsy. The thought made me chuckle. I was the old ox grazing young grass, as people would say. Thinking of that, I asked softly, "Did my parents give you a hard time?" Jack quickly shook his head. "No, not at all." I didn't believe that for a second. Knowing my parents, they probably hadn't yelled at him, but they definitely hadn't treated him kindly either. I stayed silent and just looked at him. After a few seconds, Jack sighed defeatedly. Okay, he admitted. Your dad and mom didn't yell or anything, but they did raise the wall. What? I asked, eyes wide. He nodded solemnly. A whole meter higher. At first I thought they were renovating, so I even helped out a bit. Then Jack looked up, his face full of wounded innocence. After the wall was done, they set up more than 10 mouse traps all around it. I pictured the scene in my head and couldn't help bursting out laughing. When we got off the bus at the entrance of the village, Jack handed me back my school bag. You should head home first, he said quickly. Don't let your dad see me. Hold on, I said, suddenly remembering how I'd seen him sneak something into my bag earlier on the road. I opened it and checked, and sure enough, there was a small cloth pouch inside. Take this back, I said, pulling it out and holding it toward him. I don't need it. Jack's face flushed instantly. He waved his hands in denial. That's not from me. I tilted my head, watching him. You sure about that? Because if you are, I'll just throw it away. He had no choice but to admit it, shoulders slumping. Why won't you take my money? If I don't give it to you, who else would I give it to? His words hit something tender inside me. He really was just as foolishly sincere as I had been in my past life. I'd once believed I would never change either. But no matter how kind his intentions were, I couldn't accept his money. Keep it, I told him gently. If we ever get married someday, then you can give it to me. That'll be soon enough. Jack wasn't slow. He understood right away what I meant. He pressed his lips together and fell silent for a moment before saying quietly, even if you don't marry me in the future, I still want to give you this. Giving you money makes me happy. I looked up at him and smiled. You're worried my family can't afford to send me to school, aren't you? Don't worry. After New Year, my dad's getting promoted. His salary will double. In my last life, my father had indeed been promoted to deputy factory director, and our family's income had risen sharply. We hadn't lacked money anymore. Enough that I'd been able to hand over all my own wages to Ryan. I understand what you're trying to do, I said softly. But I'd rather you use this money for yourself. Didn't you always say you wanted to start a business? Use it as your seed capital. Once you earn more, you can give it to me later. Jack didn't respond. He just kept shaking his head stubbornly, refusing to take the pouch back. Then out of the corner of my eye, I saw a familiar figure appear at the end of the village road. My heart sank instantly. I shoved the cloth pouch into Jack's hand. Go. My dad's here. Even though I tried to prepare myself, when I actually saw the traps lining the base of the wall, I was still stunned. Jack had really downplayed it just by glancing around. I could count at least 20, maybe 30 of them. Isn't this a little excessive? I muttered. My father glanced at me coolly. Excessive? Hardly. Anyone who tries climbing that wall again will remember it for the rest of their life. Why did it sound like that warning was directed at me? During the entire New Year holiday, my mother kept me under constant watch, terrified I'd sneak off to meet Jack again. It wasn't until the new term started that I finally saw him on the same bus heading toward the county school. He was sitting in the very back row. The moment our eyes met, he smiled quietly, the corners of his mouth lifting. Jack was carrying a big canvas bag. As soon as I sat down beside him, he pulled out a scarf and a pair of gloves and carefully put them on me. Then he took out a glass water bottle, an old repurposed 4 bottle filled with hot water, and slipped it into my hands. The bottle was warm to the touch, almost hot. It took an hour by bus to reach the county. The whole way there, Jack couldn't sit still. He pulled out a small bag of sunflower seeds, cracked them open one by one, and placed each seed gently in my palm. He did it slowly and patiently, his gaze soft and full of warmth. I couldn't help but be drawn in by him. Maybe because he'd had to work since he was young. He carried a maturity that boys his age didn't have. With him beside me, I felt a strange, comforting sense of safety. To be honest, he was even more handsome than Ryan. His features were stronger, his demeanor calmer, but years of hard work under the sun had left him a little rough around the edges. Sensing my gaze, Jack's face turned redder and redder until finally he reached out to cover my eyes with his cold hand. The sudden chill made me shiver. He immediately pulled his hand back, startled, but I caught it and held on tightly. Jack glanced around, then whispered, Let go. My hands are freezing. I didn't say anything. Instead, I took his hand and placed it over the warm water bottle. His body went rigid, frozen in place, but the smile spreading across his lips grew brighter and brighter. When the bus finally arrived near the school, Jack walked me the rest of the way before turning back home. I stood there for a moment watching his back as he walked away. Then as I turned around, I found Ryan standing right behind me. His eyes were cold and sharp. His jaw clenched so tightly I could hear the faint grind of his teeth. So it's true, he hissed. You came here with him? Tell me, have the two of you been sneaking around for a while now? I shot him a glance full of disgust. What's it to you? Did you lose your mind again? Ryan's chest heaved, his breath ragged. But this time, instead of exploding, he looked at me steadily and said with chilling certainty, You're one of us too, aren't you? You came back. I froze. What did you just say? Could it be he had come back too? The thought had never crossed my mind. In my last life he had died by my own hands. If he was truly reborn, how could he still dare to face me? Seeing the shock on my face, Ryan smirked triumphantly. Didn't expect that, did you? I didn't die that day. Just got hurt 10 meters down that cliff and I still lived. Guess evil people really do live long. But if he hadn't died, then how could he have been reborn? Ryan's eyes darkened with rage. It was Jack. He killed me, he spat. After I recovered, I married that college girl. But she never respected me. She humiliated me over and over. Called me a parasite, a useless man. One day we fought over a piece of land, and she knocked me out and handed me over to Jack. His face twisted with fury, his eyes bloodshot. All women are the same, vicious, unfaithful. Every last one of you except you. You were the only one who ever treated me sincerely. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. There was only one question that mattered. What about Jack? I asked. What happened to him? Ryan's lips curled into a bitter sneer. He threw me off that same cliff and then killed himself. He burst out laughing, a crazed, broken sound, tears spilling from his eyes. When I first saw him again, I thought he'd come back too. But no, he didn't even recognize me. That's when I knew he wasn't reborn. Only I was. I know everything that's going to happen for the next 15 years. So long as you treat me well, Lily, I can give you a life better than you ever dreamed of. So that was it. He had survived, lived out the rest of his miserable life, and realized only I had been naive enough to love him. And now that he'd come back, he actually thought he could play the same trick again. Did he really think I was that stupid? I looked him dead in the eye and asked quietly, Do you even know why your wife treated you that way? Ryan blinked, thrown off. Because you were never worthy of love, I said coldly. You were betrayed and abandoned because that's exactly what you deserved. A man like you, no matter how many times you come back, no one will ever love you. It was like lightning struck him. He froze, trembling all over, muttering, No, that's not true. You're lying. Someone loved me. You must love me. His face twisted, his voice breaking into a shout. You love me, Lily. You have to. Then like a madman, he lunged forward, reaching for me. But before he could touch me, Jack had already returned. His fist came down hard, slamming into Ryan's face. Ryan didn't even seem to feel the pain. He staggered up again, grabbing at me desperately. Lily's mine. No one can take her from me. She belongs to me. She's the only one who ever truly loved me. Jack yanked me behind him, his hand clamping tight around Ryan's throat, keeping him from getting close. Ryan thrashed wildly but couldn't break free. Then suddenly he grinned a hideous, venomous grin. Did you know? He croaked. In our last life, I had my fill of Lily. And you? He spat toward Jack. You were the only idiot who still treated her like something precious. The woman you love most in this world is nothing more than something I've already used. He threw his head back and laughed maniacally. My stomach twisted violently. Instinctively, I tried to pull my hand away from Jack's grasp, but he only tightened his hold, refusing to let go. Then, he stepped back once and drove his foot straight into Ryan's abdomen. The kick landed with brutal force. Ryan flew backward, crashing to the ground several feet away and hitting the dirt hard. He lay there motionless, unconscious. After that incident, Ryan was expelled from school. The hospital later confirmed that he suffered from severe mental instability. Jack and I went to visit him once at the psychiatric ward. He was wearing a faded hospital gown, crawling on the floor trying to catch ants, his body filthy and covered in dust. He didn't recognize anyone, not even himself. Jack and I sat side by side on a bench in the hospital corridor. After a long silence, I said quietly, "Actually, Ryan wasn't lying. In my past life, I really did stay with him for 15 years. I lived until I was 28. Then I came back here." Back then, Jack, whom everyone used to call Big Jack, had warned me to be careful, that I might be wasting my time. I hadn't believed him. I even argued back, saying, "Ryan's a college student, an educated man. How could someone like that ever deceive me?" But the truth proved Jack had been right all along. I turned to look at Jack and asked softly, "Don't you have something you want to ask me?" The truth was, he'd probably already guessed everything from what Ryan had said that day, but neither of us had brought it up again. Now that it was all over, I felt it was time to tell him everything. I had already prepared myself to answer any question he had. But as soon as I finished speaking, Jack's pupils contracted sharply. His hand, which had been holding mine, tightened painfully. "Why 28? He asked in a low, trembling voice. "Why that age? What did he?" He couldn't even finish the sentence. He just squeezed my hand harder, his whole body tense. After a long pause, he forced the words out between his teeth. "What did he do to you?" I glanced toward Ryan, still crawling across the floor, and slowly began to tell Jack everything about the previous life. The years of control, humiliation, and pain. When I reached the part about driving off the cliff with Ryan, how only I had died in the crash, Jack's chest rose and fell violently. His eyes were filled with agony as he stared at me. "And me?" he demanded hoarsely. "Where was I? Did I just stand there and watch him torture you?" I smiled faintly and tightened my grip on his fingers. "Guess how he came back to life?" I said softly. The realization hit him instantly. His expression froze. "So, it was me." I nodded slightly. Only when he understood that in the end, he had been the one to avenge me did his breathing begin to calm. He looked at Ryan for a long time, eyes dark and unreadable. Then, when no one was watching, he suddenly stepped forward and kicked over the basin of ants Ryan had been playing with. As Ryan screamed in panic, Jack grabbed my hand and pulled me out of the hospital at a run. After everything that had happened, my parents, though they still refused to admit it aloud, stopped objecting to Jack taking me to school. After the college entrance exam, I finally got accepted into the university I dreamed of. My parents formally agreed to our marriage. During the years I was in college, Jack used all his savings to open a small shop near campus. By the time I graduated, that tiny shop had grown into a thriving department store, far more successful than in my previous life. When I praised him for his business sense, Jack hugged me tightly, grinning with pride. "Of course," he said. "My wife deserves the very best."